One of the greatest joys of being a guitar player is getting together and playing with other musicians, especially situations where you get to jam, improvise, and stretch out. But there's certain skills you need to play well in these situations. Today we're going to cover what I think are three very important concepts for jamming and improvising with other players. Before we play anything, we've got to understand what's happening around us. Music is like a language, and playing with other people is like having a conversation. You have to listen to what other people are saying in order to contribute something meaningful to that conversation. Otherwise, it's going to be awkward. So I've got a little backing track here. Let's listen to it a little bit and see what we hear. So the first thing I'm going to focus in on when I'm listening to a track like this or sitting in with a group of musicians is the harmony. What's happening in the bass line and what's happening in the chords over top of that. Basically, what's the harmonic information we're dealing with. And this tune is kind of based around the key center of A minor. So I'm listening to the notes that are sort of coloring that A minor sound. And one of the things I hear in the bass line is the bass sliding up to the note B, which is kind of implying an A minor 9 sound. I'm also in that keyboard part hearing the note F sharp, which is kind of giving me an A minor 6 sound. So I'm keying in on those notes that sort of pop out of this track, and that could inform me in the decisions I'm going to make in the types of parts I might want to play. I might want to play something that kind of picks up on those key notes. There I was using that note B, the ninth of that A minor 9 thing, to kind of highlight a part, or playing things like, that utilize that F sharp note, or I could go, something like that, where I'm playing some double stops that have sort of A minor, and then there's that B note, the ninth, and then there's my F sharp, or I could play, something like that, where I'm hitting the F sharp up there, so. So parts like that for me come from listening to what's happening in the harmony and picking up on those key notes that stand out and using that in my own parts. Now, another thing I'm going to key in on when I'm listening is what's the rhythmic information? What's the groove? Is it a swung feel? Is it a straight feel? What kind of accents are happening in the groove? As a guitar player, I'm always focusing in on where the backbeat is and where the snare is hitting. So in this case, it's right there on the 2 and the 4 of the measure. So, that could be something I want to highlight. There's a lot of classic types of guitar parts where, you just hit with the snare drum. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Those kind of classic R&B parts, or 1, 2, 3, 4. You can just hit those things and be aware of where the snare drum is hitting. And again, that can inform your decision making. I'm also going to listen to the hi-hat. In this case, the hi-hat's playing a lot of 16th notes. So that could either tell me, maybe I want to play a 16th note phrase to match that, or maybe I want to stay out of that. If it's a real busy groove, maybe I want to play something, a little bit more spacious and open. That's just going to kind of ring out over top. Again, there's really no wrong answers with this stuff. It's just a matter of listening and using your own taste and being intentional with your decisions. So the other big thing to be aware of in terms of rhythm is where are the spaces in the groove and within the parts the other musicians are playing. So in this case, there's a lot of holes and spaces within that bass line, and the keyboard part is just sort of playing these big whole note chords. So there's some spaces in there that you might want to play with. You might want to play a part that sort of fills in that space and stays out of the way of the other instruments when they're playing, or you may want to leave that space open to kind of accentuate that space in the feel and in the groove. So again, these are just things to be aware of. Another thing that I'm definitely listening for all the time, especially on stage when playing with a band, is the dynamics, the overall dynamics of how the band is performing. Again, this kind of goes into the whole conversation aspect of playing with other people. If it's a very, gentle, quiet conversation, you don't want to come into it just screaming your lungs out, right? You want to kind of match the dynamics of the group. So in this case, it's sort of what I would consider sort of a medium dynamic. It's not super quiet. It's also not super loud. So I'm just going to be aware of that and try to match my sound and my parts with that overall dynamic feel. One last thing to kind of be aware of when you're listening and when you're thinking about parts you could potentially play is stylistic choices. Like, what is the overall vibe of the piece of music that you're playing? And in this case, it's kind of a funky sort of R&B type thing. But, there's a million styles of music. You could be on a gig where you're playing straight ahead blues, or you could be playing country music, or you could be playing hard rock or something. Stylistic choices can be important when thinking about parts or how you want to approach playing over something. That's another thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind that could inform how you're going to play. So now that we've listened to and determined what this ongoing conversation is, it's time to figure out what we want to add to it. You've got to ask yourself, what do you want to say? And all of those things we listen for, the harmony, the groove, the dynamics, can help inform that decision. And the more deliberate you are about it, the better. One of the things we all struggle with is sometimes your hands start moving before you have a fully realized idea. It's like you start talking before you even know what you're saying. So having a clear and concise idea in mind and playing it in a very intentional way is always a good approach. All right, so I'm going to play over the track now, and I'm going to be very intentional with my decisions here. And I'm going to use a lot of the things that we talked about when we were listening to the track. Things like harmony, groove, dynamics, and certainly make some stylistic choices that I think are appropriate for this music. And I'm going to use some different techniques like repetition to try to build some motifs to really try to say something meaningful with my parts over this track. This third step is really the most personal of all the steps, and there's really two ways you can look at it. Do you want to say things in your own voice, or do you want to take on someone else's voice? You can look at the latter as like being an actor playing a character, and this might be something you want if you're going for a certain sound. But it's also great to find your own unique and individual voice. The tonal choices you make, as well as the nuances your hands have as they touch the strings, all contribute to you finding your own sound, as well as the choices you make about melody, harmony, rhythm, and dynamics. All right, so I'm going to play over the track one more time, and this time I'm going to be very deliberate with the way I play things and the nuances that I'm getting from the way my fingers and the pick touch the strings. The whole idea here is to kind of stylize what you're playing and give it a unique sound that sort of has its own voice and stands out. All right, thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like more lesson content like this, or tabs, or access to these backing tracks, check out my Patreon site. The link is down in the description. Until next time, happy practicing and take care.